welcome to The Spawn Chunks, episode number 299 for Monday, May 27th, 2024. This is a podcast all about Minecraft, available across all major podcast platforms, including YouTube. If you're enjoying the show, consider subscribing wherever you're listening to this. My name is Jonny, but the internet knows me as Pixel Riffs, and joining me, as always, is Stone Cold Joel Duggan! Hello, Joel!
It's always so hard in a podcast when you want to yell, but you know you don't want to like peak the mics. Like you get
that's holding back.
The audio setup for live wrestling matches or live skateboarding game shows from Japan, which is what we were talking about in the pre-show, is just astronomical. Like the amount of work that goes into those things is just ridiculous. And they're a good time. And if you want to hear more about that, then you can check out the Render Distance. That's the extended version of the podcast that we record every week for our patrons. And that is available at patreon.com/thespawnchunks. And we have a couple of things to announce. Normally, patrons also get access to the monthly Minecraft Hangout. That had to get bumped from this past Saturday. It's normally the last Saturday of the month. Jonny had some friends visiting, so we bumped it to Saturday, June 1st. That is going to be at 10 a.m. Atlantic. That is 2 p.m. in the UK. We hang out with our patrons. They show us in screenshots what they've been building in Minecraft, and we chat about it. So the entire month of May has been available for builds and projects. So we are very interested to see what's going to come of those. We also do quarterly Hangouts, which is a great way to catch up on how the podcast is doing. That's where Jonny and I talk about download numbers, YouTube metrics, that kind of thing. That is going to be sometime in July, because that would be the end of Q2, plus a little bit of time for us to kind of like parse those numbers and collect the data. And last but not least, as you might have guessed, after 299 comes episode 300. And we have been probing our listeners for the last few weeks for the all Q&A episode that's going to happen next week. That is going to be where Jonny and I are answering a lot of one-sentence email questions from the community, and we're going to go through as many of those as we can. If you'd like to send those in, it's spawnchunkmail@gmail.com. That's the address. Keep them short. They can be fun. They can be Minecraft related. They can be podcast related. Just keep them simple, keep them sweet, and we'll see which ones we can manage to get on the show. And we have been working towards a change in format. Some of our patrons know this because we've been testing this on the live recordings of the last few weeks. We are adding video to the podcast. So starting next week, you will have the option to watch the podcast on YouTube. Instead of the audio playing along with a still image in the title card for each episode, you'll see Jonny and I on camera. It's a different format for us. I'm sure there will be some unforeseen bumps as we have been working and testing things out on Discord the last few weeks. We do think that video is going to be really good for us going forward, and hopefully it will get some more retention and some more attention on platforms like YouTube that are really expanding as far as podcasts are concerned. Now, when it comes to some future guests, they may not be comfortable on video, so those episodes will only include video from Jonny and I. It'll be totally up to the guest if they are cool with being on video. So the audio format of the show is going to remain the same. It's going to be a very, very similar workflow, hopefully, for Jonny. For folks that don't know, Jonny does all the editing on the podcast. And so it's going to be still available for our patrons, still available for all of the major podcasting platforms that it's already on. It's just the YouTube component is going to have video, which hopefully should also allow us to circulate some clips on social media, things like TikTok and Instagram, that kind of stuff.
Yeah, so if you're somebody who listens in the car on the way to work or whatever, don't worry, nothing is going to change for you. But for those who like to enjoy this at home on the second monitor while they're mining in Minecraft or anything like that, then you'll be able to occasionally look over to see Joel and I laughing about whatever we're discussing this time around. And we'll probably not include too much in the way of additional video content other than just like us chatting, but there might be the option to like actually look at the Minecraft.net changelog articles, just kind of scroll through those on the side to kind of highlight different stuff. And occasionally the screenshots that we talk about being in the show notes on thespawnchunks.com about what we've been doing in Minecraft and like links to various stuff that we've talked about, those might also pop up in the video format as well. We're still experimenting with that kind of thing. It depends what we have the production time for each week. But I'm looking forward to it. It should be a really fun way to expand the podcast and hopefully bring in some new listeners. For now, though, let's get started with our quick login. Joel, what's new on the Citadel this week?
Well, after completing the Lilac Farmstead last week, I decided to just move up the road. There's that moment when you finish one build, you have to decide what you're going to do next. But I had farm building fresh in my mind, and those skills and the new things that I was doing ready. So I decided to just move up the west road and start working on the pumpkin farm. And something that I talked about a lot on stream this weekend is that the idea for this pumpkin farm came from a natural pumpkin patch in the sunflower field that was already there, as well as a pond that was already there. Now, I moved the pond because I think it works better for it to be on the west side of the property than it was on the east side. And obviously, I'm expanding the pumpkin patch because there was 6 or 8 pumpkins, and I'm putting down several stacks, of pumpkins. And it was just the beginning stages. So for folks that are wondering how I approach a build like this, I mean, if you go and watch the VODs either on YouTube or on Twitch, both of which are just Joel Duggan, very easy to find. I think it's Joel Duggan VODs actually on YouTube. But what it is just me going around a rough area, changing the wall that I had already put down, just loose cobblestone. It'll get textured later, and deciding where I want the farm to be, where I want the house to be. And I start walking through the area and putting down rough paths, eventually changing those into coarse dirt, trying to figure out where I want the pumpkins to be. And surprisingly, one of the things that I discovered as I was making these custom pumpkin patches is that they look better when you space them out a lot more than you think. So unlike regular crops, which is rows and rows and rows, with pumpkins, of course, if you do that, they're blocks. It just looks like a giant bar of pumpkin. You can't really differentiate them unless you put them at angles to one another. So I'm really only doing groups of 2 or 3, sometimes 4 if they happen to overlap. But I'm mostly trying to create space by also adding in things like mangrove leaves that look kind of like viney bushes, bone mealing a fern to give it that kind of too tall look with the sprigs on it, and it also looks kind of viney. I do have the texture pack from vanillatweaks.net that changes the color of pumpkin vines when they're actually grown from the ground to differentiate them from melon vines. I think melon vines are a little bit more green, where pumpkin vines are a little bit more brown. And so I may actually remove that depending on how it vibes with everything. But I haven't done a lot of natural pumpkin growing because they take a long time. And you have to be very careful and kind of nudge them in the direction that you want them to go. So what I'm doing right now is I'm manually replacing pumpkins. Eventually I will go back and plant some and then try to block the area so that it only grows in the one direction I want it to. Because there are going to be some places closer to the paths where I want you to be able to see, oh, there's the pumpkin and it is attached to the ground. But you can't do that on your own, just kind of manually. And you can't bone meal the last phase of a pumpkin plant. You have to you can bone meal it to the last phase, but then that last part where it goes from just the stem to having the pumpkin, you can't bone meal that. You have to wait. So I've got a lot of pumpkin stems that are at full capacity. As part of an experiment, I also had some cobblestone walls and stuff to kind of keep the pumpkins from growing one direction and maybe force them to grow in the other. And as a result, I actually kind of like the idea of having a wall in the middle of the field. It's almost like maybe it was an earlier field and it wasn't as big and it's since expanded, but then this wall is now just, crumbled away or whatever. So I actually might keep this wall. I'll design it a lot nicer and make it look, something more suitable. But I'm going to be going down that road. And what was the other thing that I did? Oh, the house. I took some inspiration from a post on Pinterest. And I'll have a link to the user and everybody in the show notes this week on thespawnchunks.com. And it was meant to be like a rustic cabin, but I really liked the roof palette, which was mostly jungle wood and granite with a little bit of spruce and stuff thrown in, maybe with some composters. So not necessarily orange, but definitely orange adjacent as far as the woods go. The jungle wood is pretty warm. And so it's complementing the pumpkins really nicely. I'm using diorite and calcite and I think some clay in the base. The design of it is more my own. It's more the color palette that I've just been being inspired by from this, Instagram and Pinterest post. And what I really like so far about it is now the view from the north wall of West Hill really looks like it's filling in. You've got farms that are filling in both sides, the full side of the road. You've got different colors, different plants, different layers to everything, green stuff going through. So it's really starting to feel like a solid area. And I know that I've been pushing to finish West Hill, and there are still a few things in the keep and other things like that that have to get done. But I also really want that view from West Hill to feel completed. And I think this is the last area. I think everything to the east and south, because the west is the mountain, so that's done. But yeah, the south is done, and the east really doesn't go anywhere. So like, there's no civilization out there to really be seen. It's more just like a road that goes into the distance. So the north part is really the only part that's left to make the area feel complete. So I'm looking forward to wrapping this up. And it's fun to have these farms because like the houses are small. They take no time to do inside. Roofs are only like 5 or 6 blocks tall, maybe 5 or 6 blocks long. So it's once you decide on a palette, it's really just about like putting in the details. So it's not like a huge or complicated undertaking. It's more about that organic placement and try not to overthink too much.
Yeah, the color was the thing I was going to bring up, because obviously pumpkins being so bright and orange, and having worked on the lilac farm before this, I think it's nice that you're able to both fill out that area with things that don't just look like greenery and nature and the kind of thing that looks like filler in those contexts, and also you were talking about before having to really branch out in terms of the block palette to get away from the entirety of West Hill being stone grey and wood brown. And so I think this must feel like a really refreshing exercise in how else can we work color into the scenario whilst keeping things natural to the medieval environment. And obviously farming vegetables, they can be bright colors, they can kind of stand out on their own and be out in the open so they're visible from a variety of angles. I think that's a really smart way of filling out the space, especially when, as you said, the pumpkin farm, once you start building it out, feels like it should take up more space just because the pumpkins don't want to be like a wall of orange. Like you want to have them a little bit checkerboarded and a little bit kind of spaced out. So it fills up the room in a way that still feels natural and provides all of that color.
Thanks. And it's in a similar way to the opposite of the wheat farm. Like the wheat farm looks good because it's nothing but wheat for as far as the eye can see. Mm-hmm. Whereas the lilac farm looks good because it's a combination of lilacs, the beetroot you mentioned last week in the raised beds, the pitcher plants, and then there's a little patch of carrots at the back. So stuff like that, having that variety makes it feel a little bit more interesting. So I've already decided like, oh man, like I just kind of thought I was going to robotically go in and fill this farm set in with pumpkins. And I'm not. Like, I'm going to do a pumpkin patch that is the key element that you experience when you walk down the main path. But after that, like, I'm thinking about adding like maybe like a little duck pond or some other things at the back of the farm that might make more sense, pig pen or something like that, that kind of thing. And it's something that I think is going to add a little bit more life to it. And that variety is definitely something that I find both fun and challenging, especially in the block palettes, because moving away from the gray and the brown of West Hill is great, but then you're building these farms and you have to choose materials that don't look fancy. Like you don't want the farmhouses to look fancier than the town.
Yeah,
right?
sure.
So I had to like, it's mostly the roofs. I think it's that you can, in Minecraft, you can kind of build the bottom of a house of just about anything, and you can either make it look rustic or not. You're not really too hamstrung there, unless you're building something out of quartz or something shiny. But as far as all the stones go, it really doesn't matter. It's the roofs. I find the roofs are the ones that you have to like really pay attention to. And the cleaner the roof, the fancier it looks. Yeah. So that's why I'm going with this textured kind of model look, especially because like the granite and the jungle wood sort of go together, but they also kind of don't. They almost look like a little bit of patchwork. So in a way, it's almost like, well, this was mostly probably a jungle roof when it was first built, but now that it's had to be patched with clay or whatever they had lying around, right? And I might even try to put a hay bale or two up there because I haven't done the final pass. I've just kind of done, what I like to do is like do the initial form in whatever blocks I've got around, that I'm using in the build. Then I'll go through and I'll do like a really rough texture pass. And I don't even do that on the whole thing. It's really only the front of it has got texture. And then I say, okay, when I go in to refine everything, that's when I'm going to like maybe add in those little pops of that fifth block that you might not have thought of, or just little touches like that. Adding a vine or mossy bits, something to show that the roof has got some weather to it. Or you know how when you've got a tree near your roof, sometimes the seeds will fall off the tree and they'll like kind of embed themselves in the shingled roof, and you'll end up with like some like mossy growth on the roof. So I want to try and do stuff like that will help the roof and the build feel like it's been around for a lot longer. Yeah. So that's coming, but at the phase right now, it's just that initial pass. But I like the way it's going. It's pretty fun to see the whole thing, come together from an empty field to something with direction and purpose in just a few streams.
Yeah, it's definitely taking shape. And speaking of taking shapes, I have completed rebuilding the hole on my Thursday stream last week. The entire thing is now built as an enormous cylinder of terrain in the sky, and it came together faster than I expected, but would not have been possible without Lightmatica for a number of reasons, but easy place mode was the MVP of this whole project. So that is now built on the server, and I'm working on the schematic for the surrounding mining machinery, which I am hoping will come together equally quickly, provided that I can gather all of the resources I need, because now I'm gathering blocks that are not part of what I've been digging out of the ground this entire time. I need a lot of white concrete is basically where I'm at the moment, because I want it to still look kind of space age, and while it's going to be a little dirty in places and kind of look like it's a well-worn structure, I don't know that I really have time to go absolutely ham with the details, so I'm just going to stick to a fairly basic palette. The design I've gone with has a lot of white concrete. I am texturing with a bit of calcite, which I have in the mountain nearby me, but then I have a ton of diorite that I dug out of the ground, and I have a lot of bone blocks from the Wither Skeleton farm and then bone meal that I was collecting from composting the moss that I was using to dig stuff out. So for the most part, I think I can be smart with the resources I need, except for the white concrete, which requires me to go and dig up a desert, and then I've got a decent amount of gravel, but gravel was not like the primary thing that I was pulling out of the ground. I'm hoping that it will come together in time. I'm working on, there's a giant ring that's sort of encircling the top part of it where it's supposed to have come down and kind of clamped to the section of terrain. And further down, there are going to be some other rings and like jet boosters for the whole thing. So it looks like it's effectively got like a space shuttle, like, exit velocity fuel tank kind of thing strapped to each side of it, probably on 8 sides. And then it's all going to be woven together at the top with a central hub from which there are like spokes coming out supporting the entire thing. Based on the design of this thing from the Solstice 5 short film that I've been working from, I'm going to try my best to get it done this week, but this is really the last week that I can really build anything on Minecraft SOS before the server wraps up. So, yeah, since then, there's some stuff that I'm going to be talking about in the main discussion where there were some high-stakes events that took place, and I almost didn't get the chance to finish this project at all, but I am grateful to have at least survived up until this point, and hopefully I'll be able to throw it together without too much issue. At least I know I'll be able to convert all of the concrete powder because I have a 128 block diameter hole that is filled with water. So I can convert all of the concrete down there, and I have no problems with that side of things. It's just making sure everything else is going to come together okay now.
So you filled the hole with water now?
I mean, it's not filled to the brim. It's got water at the bottom of it at bedrock sort of level. So that we don't have stuff spawning. Yeah, right. Exactly.
Yeah. I was like, gee, you filled the hole? That would take forever.
Yeah. No, I was not planning on doing that layer by layer. Although it wouldn't take as long as you think. You just have to do water around like one side of it, and then honestly, you could fill it from the top and just grow a lot of kelp plants with all of the bone meal that I've acquired. You might be able to get like a section of it where you do one segment and then the rest just floods in with water sources. Like I've done that with Guardian farms a couple of times, and it's always been like a surprisingly effective strategy. But man, it would be far too much work and kind of unrealistic for what I wanted, actually. I'm justifying the fact that the water is at the bottom of the hole by the fact that the cylinder itself had like little kind of hidden lakes and aquifers and stuff in it, which I had completely drained for the schematic because I didn't want to be going around with like buckets of water in my inventory and placing all of that. So I've done none of that, and I decided, with water physics being a slightly more realistic thing, you could just imagine that all of the water is drained out of it as it's been pulled out of the ground, and that's just settled at like a water table kind of level in the hole below. But I've done the same thing with lava as well. There's no lava present in this. There are a lot of mobs in it now because the entire thing is hollow and dark inside. So, luckily, with all of the caves and stuff that I've built into it, I was building this up layer by layer so I could do the caves without having to go inside the cave spaces at any point. And so I think all of those are sealed off pretty effectively, and I've never had to wander in and light anything up. But it's very unsafe if you go in, but there shouldn't really be anywhere that you can get into the main body of it unless you knocked a hole in it somewhere or, dug down from the dirt that I've placed on the top of it. But all in all, it's a really satisfying thing to see especially in the background of other people's screenshots from the server. Because if you go to Owen's base, like even I think Fwip posted a picture in our Discord of the base that he's been working on, but he has the Bobby mod installed that lets him, have a bunch of effectively cached snapshots of each of the chunks that are outside of what would normally be, render distance or simulation distance. And he can see the edge of the cylinder from where he is about 1,000 blocks away, and it looks monolithic. And I'm like, this is exactly what I wanted it to be. And we'll see where it ends up by the end of this week. But yeah, next week I will hopefully have some screenshots to share of a very different looking project.
These builds are always so much work, but the reward at the end is that overwhelming feeling of seeing something that large.
Yeah. Yes.
In a place in Minecraft that you don't normally see it, whether it's a custom mountain or just a big, statue. People do like, organic looking statues, like the Argonath and stuff like that from Lord of the Rings. And then you've got, your mining cylinder here, and that kind of thing it stands out so much. And when it's that large, I mean, every Minecraft player just understands just visually going, that's a lot of work.
Yeah.
And that's really cool. Like that's cool and a lot of work all at the same time. And I like the idea of the rings. I think that's going to be really, really cool, especially if it's white concrete, because it's going to stand out so much against like the gray of the cylinder. And depending on the scale, like if you don't want to do anything too crazy with like the textures, and if you end up running out of time, even like on that scale, even just having like little indents, I find that when you get far enough away in Minecraft, especially on something this big, having like just little indents in the actual form around the ring will create enough texture to like make it look like a large panel, or that's where this section of the ring is and that's where that section of the ring is, like that kind of stuff. And it's very, very cool. And I like the reference images too of like what the top of it looks like. And the I guess the hardest part is going to be like showing any kind of action, like you want it to be lifting, but doing like either the jet stream or the hover stream or whatever is going to be coming out the bottom of those jetpacks, or smoke or debris or anything like that. Have you done any work? I mean, I know we haven't seen them in the screenshots, but have you done any work around the base, like where it's actually been pulled from the ground? Is it just like a clean cut, or is there plans to do any like design around the actual contact point where it used to be in the ground?
It's something I've considered a bonus thing if I have time. Like the whole purpose of it was like, first of all, can I get the hole dug in the time that we had, and then work with a cylinder? Like I wasn't worried too much about like the physical representation of it. It's exactly the diameter of the hole below, so obviously there would need to be a bit of wiggle room for getting the machinery in there in the first place if I was designing this to feel like a proper part of the world. So I feel like it's more like optional stuff that I can tack on to the end of the project if I really feel like I have to, or if I have the time. But I think it's just going to stand on its own for the time being as, something with very few environmental effects around it. And we'll see where things go from there. If I have the time this week, maybe I'll be able to do a little bit more of that detail stuff. But I just don't know what I'm going to have the time for, so I'm kind of hedging my bets at this point and just aiming for the big structure.
So I think it's a great accomplishment to do something like this on a limited server, like not only just hardcore, but one that had an end date. Like that takes planning and discipline, and obviously just a lot of just time in the game.
Yeah, so that's been my week. Let's move on into the news. This week we had Java Edition Snapshot 24W21A and also a B snapshot. To quote the article, this week we're bringing a snapshot you can vibe out to. This time around we're bringing data-driven jukeboxes, a new game rule, and a bunch of fixes. Also in addition for Snapshot 24W21B, this was released to fix a frequent crash which happened when zombies spawned in areas of high local difficulty. So the changes in 24W21A, they add that it seems we cooked a bit too hard with the new piston sounds last week, which is why we're reverting back to the old sounds again. They've lowered the volume of the original sounds to address initial feedback of pistons being too loud. The pause menu can now include a list of links provided by your server. Improvements to the disconnection screen have also been made. Any member of a Minecraft realm can now upgrade a world, and in the realm's main screen, all online players of a realm are displayed. When hovered, a tooltip is shown with each player's head and name. Some changes came to vaults. They've added a sound effect to help players understand that they have already looted a vault in a trial chamber, and in trial chambers themselves, they are now less likely to generate in the deep dark biome. Animal Panic has also seen a couple of changes. Animals now panic based on the damage caused by predefined damage source types. The panic lasts for 2 seconds after damage is dealt, and the following damage type tags are used by vanilla animals. Panic environmental causes used by wolves, polar bear adults, and pandas, and panic causes is a general one used by all other animals and baby polar bears. Server links. Servers can provide a list of links to clients. If a client has received any links, a new button called Server Links will show up in the Pause Game screen. And to make space for that button, Report Bugs and Give Feedback buttons are going to be moved into a sub-screen if necessary. They're still working on the details of that. In improvements to the disconnection screen, in some cases, the client will now store detailed information about disconnection, similar to how crash reports are handled. When that happens, Open Disconnection Report Directory buttons will be added to the disconnection screen. When the server provides a link for bug reporting, it will also be added as a button to the disconnection screen. If you want to know more details about this, because this is a bit more technical, there are details about both those last items in the technical changes section of the changelog, which we've omitted from our show notes because they're a little bit crunchy to read, so make sure you read those if you are curious. Going on to the general technical changes in 24W21A, though, the resource pack version is now 34 and the data pack version is now 45. This means that jukebox songs are now data-driven and there's a bit of new command syntax, including a new game rule. The new Entities with passengers can use portals game rule. It's a bit of a mouthful and a lot to type, but when true, entities with passengers can use nether portals, end portals, and end gateways. So anything in a minecart or a boat can still travel through a nether portal in that minecart or boat, which is not previously the case, so this game rule defaults to false to make sure it doesn't break too much about existing gameplay. There are further tweaks to item components and other mechanics which have recently become data-driven, like enchantments. You can read about those on the Snapshot changelog. Last of all, the fixed bugs of note in 24W21A. There might be one or two from the B snapshot here as well. That includes the bug in which entities with passengers could not travel through portals. That's now been fixed, along with hunger saturation depleting on peaceful difficulty, non-player entities going through a nether portal not generating a portal in the nether if one didn't exist before, and likewise non-player entities being unable to travel through unlinked nether portals. Those bugs have been fixed along with that nether portal change. Double doors did not automatically form between waxed and unwaxed copper doors, even of the same variant, and the bolt armor trim could not be duplicated with a waxed copper block. Those have both been fixed, so they should be working as you might expect. And the Thorns enchantment wasn't working when entities were hit by wind charges, along with mounted entities being immune to wind charge damage. So a couple of tweaks to wind charges as well. A bunch of other bugs have been fixed in the snapshot. So for more, head over to Minecraft.net and check out the changelog for snapshots 24W21B.
Minecraft Bedrock Edition Beta and Preview 1.21.10.20 was published on May 22nd, 2024. Under the trial spawner, they fixed some trial spawner texture inconsistencies. For commands, music will no longer be stopped by the /stop sound command. For game tips, added a swim tip for touch devices. How to move is now taught to players on touch devices with the D-pad control scheme. Quote, sometimes it's not a good time to learn new gameplay skills. For example, opening your inventory is not a relevant skill when you just discovered that the floor is lava. So here are some additional constraints for when game tips don't show up. The swim game tip only shows up when you are in water. The break block tip is the most relevant tip when you're freezing in powdered snow. Other tips won't show up. When there are hostile mobs nearby, you can still learn skills that will help you run away, movement, jumping, and camera movement, but other tips won't bother you. The mace no longer breaks cobwebs and bamboo as fast as swords and other sharp items. The mace's smash attack no longer knocks back mobs that have been tamed by the player wielding the mace. Attacking an entity with the mace enchanted with the wind burst enchantment no longer negates fall damage. Under the marketplace, there is a fix to a number of bugs related to downloading content getting stuck, including errors related to, quote, downloads are stuck at 0%, and broken content updates. Under mobs, the Bogged's underwater melee attack no longer applies nullness effect to the victim. Parrots can now correctly imitate the Bogged when nearby. Witches now always drop 4 to 8 redstone dust on death. This is to improve the viability of farms that utilize witch huts to obtain redstone dust. That sounds familiar. The Java snapshot last week included that change. Petrified oak slabs. The oak slab looking variation of the stone block slab is now flattened into its own new block, Minecraft Petrified Oak Slab. Mechanically, this behaves like other stone slabs. Petrified oak slab can only be obtained and placed through commands. This also applies to the petrified oak double slab. Under projectiles, the wind charge projectile can now be summoned via the summon command. Under realms, all items in the realms purchased screen are now focusable and can be navigated through using the gamepad input. Trial chambers now generate far less frequently in the deep dark biome. For the user interface, we have been testing our fixed D-pad tweaks in preview for a few weeks and are looking forward to your feedback. We'll have a link to that in our show notes this week. When regeneration effect is active, hearts on the heads-up display no longer move too fast. Shift-clicking inventory items no longer causes them to stack count to briefly appear above the stack. Interacting with a block outside of a player's reach no longer causes the block interface to briefly appear. Adding new visual elements to hardcore mode in Create New World and Edit World, and a sound effect with toggling hardcore mode on or off. That's in preview only. Items no longer render in front of stack size number when being quick moved. Number on a stack of items no longer overlaps with the item hover text in a villager's trade menu. Item no longer moves slightly in slot after being quick moved to an anvil. Items no longer stay selected in touch devices when switching between creative and inventory tabs, and items can now be removed from the offhand slot and crafting grids by tapping on other items in creative inventory on mobile devices. For the vault, the loot ejected from the vault in trial chambers is now dependent on level, position, and player seed. A more expansive list of changes in the Bedrock Preview Edition, including technical changes and addition to the API and editor, can be found in the feedback.minecraft.net article linked in our show notes this week at thespawnchunks.com.
So going back to the Java snapshot, they've reverted the piston sound, which is, I think, a predictable change, but I find it interesting that they have reverted it instead of having another pass at it. And I'm kind of wondering if this is because of overwhelming community feedback that they just liked the existing piston noise, and that, you know, the vibe Mojang got from everything that was in this discussion last week was that the existing piston noise was actually fine, it was just too loud. Or maybe because the sound designers don't have time to take another pass at it because they have a lot on their plate right now. So I don't know if we're going to get like a specific answer on that, and maybe it'd be kind of fun to see if people have reached out on social media to Samuel Orberg or whoever else on the kind of sound design side of Mojang has a specific answer about that, or if it was just like, we decided that the community was probably right about just being so used to the piston noise that they didn't really want it to change in the end.
I wonder if we'll end up with more player controls rather than more Mojang implemented changes and stuff like this. So when it comes to sounds that players find either annoying, overwhelming, perhaps sensitive to, rather than just Mojang changing the noise, changing the volume, that kind of thing, changing the intensity, if similar to the end portal visual wobble or the nausea effect, where we now have sliders that you can turn that all the way off. You can turn it down if you like. You don't like it as strong, but you don't want it to completely go away. I wonder if we'll end up with some more minute control over sounds in the game, like perhaps a section of block sounds being a subcategory of redstone block sounds. So you can turn up all of that or turn down all of that. Right now, we can rely on things like wool in the game to mute things like a skulk sensor, but if you had a volume control on that would also be good. I guess the difference there is that the woolen game would affect everybody if it was a multiplayer server, whereas a volume control for you would just be like, I I want people to have fun with this on the server, but I really find it annoying, so I need to be able to turn it down. I know that a lot of this probably matters a little bit more to Bedrock players because the game just updates. You're always playing the latest version, and you don't have quite the control that Java players do. Because like if you don't like something in Java as far as the sound goes, even if it's just too loud, you can download either a data pack or a resource pack that will just change it.
Yeah.
You know, and you have access to that. I know that on our server, zombified piglins. Well, at the time it was zombie piglins, or zombie. What
They
was
used
it
to be
called before?
zombie pigmen.
Zombie pigmen. Wow, I'm getting them, my pigs
it's
confused.
It's wild that it's been long enough that we can't remember the name zombie pigmen.
Yeah,
that's a sign that the Nether update was working.
Yeah, it's because I trained my brain not to call them pigmen for the last like 4 or 5 years. But I turned those down. Ghasts we turned down.
Yeah.
And I think Enderman as well. Like there's just a number of, not like all Enderman sounds, but like the angry Enderman sound.
Yeah.
Like, let's turn that down. That's a little bit screamy, you know. So we have, and they're not changed. It's just that I opened them up in an audio editor. As a podcaster, I had those skills, and I just took the volume and said, like, let's just take this down by like to make it 25% of what it was before.
Yeah.
And it makes a huge difference because the gas is still a high enough pitch that you can still hear it.
Mm-hmm.
It just doesn't like make your eyeball twitch when it happens.
Doesn't jump scare you quite as much.
No, exactly. You know, and I think it's kind of fun the first time it happens in game, but after that you're like, okay, these things are everywhere, and I'm done. Like I am done with it. So you know, as a Java player, you do have those kind of controls. But I mean, I'm glad to see that they listened and that they'll come up with something new. Maybe they'll just reduce the volume, but it would be cool. I think we have a lot of accessibility options for people that need visual accessibility, but I don't, off the top of my head, know a lot of audio accessibility in the game. So maybe that'll be next, right?
I'm trying to remember which mod it was that I had on the Division SMP absolutely ages ago. It might have been part of Dynamic Surroundings or something like that, but that gave you, if you opened up the mod menu, a lot finer control over individual sound effects. You could toggle them on and off, or you could set specific volume levels for them. And so that was mainly so that, you know, if you didn't like the ambient cricket chirping or like the flies that, you know, if you were buzzing around in a swamp or something like that, like you could turn those noises off that were meant to just be there for immersion. But I think it also allowed you control over stuff like how loud Nether portals got and that the kind of things that are usually little pet peeves like that for players. So I do wonder if maybe in the sound settings menu, like an advanced sound settings option could, like, to prevent it just from being a wall of sliders right away when you open the sound menu, maybe there's room for them to have a separate tab, for like fine-tuning a few of the things that become pain points for players, especially in like a long-term built-up world. But at least good to know that they're addressing the feedback still, and that people who kind of ended up mocking the piston sound, but from a place of love and from a place of we actually want to give constructive feedback on this, kind of got their voices heard. The other interesting change, I think, from this Java snapshot is the Nether portal fixes, because that really caught my attention. I like that the passengers through portals behavior defaults to off, so it doesn't break things right now, because I know that, you know, having watched Hermitcraft for a little while, there are several mechanics on that rely on removing mobs from minecarts or getting them back into minecarts. They're using the Nether as their postal system right now, so whether stuff can travel through that in minecarts is also kind of pivotal to the system still functioning, although it's mainly minecart chests, and they retain their contents as they travel through Nether portals. So maybe this is just another offshoot of that behavior, but honestly, having had a heck of a time trying to move mobs around through Nether portals in the past, this is a game rule I actually wouldn't mind switching on. Because if you want to, say, transport a blaze from a Nether portal to the overworld, and you're using a minecart to do that, it becomes so much easier if you don't have to take the blaze out of the minecart at any point in that process, because getting them back in the minecart on the other side of the portal is going to be absolute chaos. And likewise, if you're, say, moving frogs around through Nether portals and that kind of thing to put them in a magma cube farm for frog lights, let's say, I think it's a lot better to have seamless transitions between the Nether and the overworld. It just breaks a few mechanics that people rely on for stuff like chunk loading or various other bits and pieces. So, yeah, I'm kind of curious what knock-on effects that will have, and if it'll become more commonplace to switch on the passengers through portals game rule in the same way that it's fairly common to switch off stuff like fire spread on a server where there are a lot of builders.
I think that's a fair assessment. I mean, I think that's something that we would consider on a long-term server where you get to a point where you're moving mobs around out of just pure fun, something to do. Like you want to make a guardian farm, or you want to move a guardian like to be the catalyst in another farm entirely, like a squid farm or something like that.
Sure.
I think that kind of stuff would be something that we would look at too in terms of turning that on. When I first read this, I thought it was pertaining to things like, if you're riding a horse and you're going through a nether portal.
I mean, that's another great case in point. Yeah, another really good example of how that behavior could be useful.
So I think that kind of stuff makes sense. And especially as you're getting into bigger worlds, longer term worlds, we have in the last few years had more things available to us in terms of travel speed that is not just an elytra. And so when you see servers like Hermitcraft that you just brought up, taking the first several weeks of their server reset to focus on horse, and that kind of transportation on the overworld, if that was to carry over into the Nether, then like that takes that viable gameplay option and extends that to like, well, it's going to make it smoother for me to get into the Nether and just keep on running with the horse. So let's just do that for longer before we have to switch to elytra, and everything just becomes more convenient. I think really it just depends on when people start to build high. At that point, the horse just becomes less of a convenience. But this kind of stuff I think is, again, giving the options in the game, I think is great, because Minecraft is a sandbox game. And while you're in it, while it does have some rules that govern it, you can really play however you want. And by allowing more options on the other side of it, it allows people that are deeply knowledgeable in the game to be able to play however they want. Like we have Vine Tick turned off. We have debated turning off the Wandering Trader. We have raids turned off. And that's a behavior that we decided on as a server before they made the most recent. I mean, obviously the most recent changes aren't in the game yet, but like before we knew that these changes were coming, we just turned them off because we found them kind of problematic. They would happen when we didn't want them to happen. And we might turn them back on because if any of the other server mates are interested in participating in raids, we now have that option to like, well, we can turn them on and they just won't happen unless you actually start one on purpose.
Yeah.
And so that means that's another part of the game that we can bring back in. But I love that we've had that option to remove them over the last few years, right? So I think that this kind of stuff is always good for the game.
Yeah, I think this could even end up being like a bit of a buff to minecarts, which people have found annoying to set up long-term transport connections with because they don't travel especially fast. And now, if you have the option to effectively hands-free travel your way through a nether portal, keep going in the same minecart, and then come out the other side with that sort of 1-to-8 ratio of nether travel, making it way faster to travel short distances in the overworld, then you can, potentially set up a transport network that's a lot more effective. And minecarts stay relevant to the meta of playing on a long-term server. So I think that's going to be an interesting thing to see if people will adopt that game rule long-term, or if it's the kind of thing that stays off just because people prefer to play with all of the default settings.
I wonder how that's going to affect farms, because I know of a lot of farms that, will take the mobs that are being farmed and shoot them into the nether quickly, like to quickly clear the area. But I now also wonder, like, what kind of farms could utilize a mob being collected from somewhere, take advantage of that nether 1-to-8 ratio, collect that mob, bring it into the nether, and then pop it out at the new location in the farm for what you want it for.
Yeah.
I think that's really interesting to know that you could have, I don't know, a guardian farm that still kills the guardians in the overworld, but transports them from the guardian farm to the shore in the nether. Like you don't have to dig a huge tunnel. You could just dig, like a 16 block tunnel and you're fine. And it just would go in and out. And I guess the only difference would be like, would the minecart still move if there wasn't a player loading the nether? But like that kind of stuff can be loaded with chunk loaders and things. Like, again, people with more technical minds than me would be able to figure it out, I'm sure, and see what advantages it might give. But again, more interesting and dynamic player generated content comes out of changes like this, right?
Yeah, my first thought was charged creepers. Being able to get those to the nether, or get wither skeletons from the nether to a charged creeper farm and be able to control those like only appearing one at a time, so you could use them to get 1-to-1 with a skeleton skull farms a little bit more viably, that kind of thing. Like there's a few different options like that I can see players using stuff like this for. So exciting times. Interesting to see the landscape change. For now, we're going to move on into chunk mail, and one final reminder that episode 300 is fast approaching. We're planning an all Q&A episode, as Joel said at the top of the show, so to try and include as many people from the community as possible, we'd like you to send in a one-sentence question about anything you would like to ask us. It can be about Minecraft, it can be about doing the podcast and other podcasts that Joel or I have done, it can be about other video games, our inspiration for Minecraft, other life experiences, anything like that. Make sure to keep them fun. You can send those to spawnchunkmail@gmail.com, and be sure to add 300 Q&A to the subject line of your email so we can sort them for the show. That's only a few more days to get those questions in before we'll be sorting through them, and we'll be trying to pick out a few questions throughout the week. So get them in, and Joel is going to read you the first email from today.
This first email comes from MC Engineer, adding belts to Minecraft. Hey, Jonny and Joel. I think it would be cool for Mojang to add a new belt armor slot to Minecraft. I think there should be 4 belts to accommodate different playstyles: a tool belt, a combat belt, a builder's belt, and an explorer's belt. These belts could be found as loot in different areas tailored to the playstyle. Combat belts could be in trial chambers, tool belts in abandoned mine shafts, and so on. When it comes to functionality, the belts could have an Omni tool that allows you to use a single slot to mine, and it would auto-equip the correct tool for that material. This would unlock if a pick, shovel, or an axe were placed in the tool belt inventory. To access the Omni tool, there could be an extra slot in your hotbar similar to the current offhand slot in the inventory. I haven't fleshed out the other ideas for the belts, so I thought I would leave it up to you guys for a discussion. The MC Engineer tripped and fell off a cliff because his explorer's belt was not on tight enough.
Is it weird that when I read the subject line, adding belts, I assumed they were talking about conveyor belts? Like, maybe I'm just so like into the create mod stuff that I've been seeing on YouTube lately, but I was thinking this was going to be about like more automation and stuff like that. But no, this is kind of an extension of a discussion we had a couple of episodes ago, I think, about inventory expansion and how some of that stuff could be handled while still feeling like it fits within the world of Minecraft. So yeah, an interesting expansion on the ideas that we were sharing in that episode.
Yeah, we had an email last week too about inventory as well, because there was a sort inventory button question that was also talking about this kind of stuff. I know that I've mentioned before that a tool belt or separate tool inventory would free up a lot of inventory space for building and exploring and gathering. So if your tools and other things that you need immediately, like food, rockets, that kind of stuff, were all in a separate place, then it leaves you an entire hotbar almost of different spaces to include other things. I like the idea here that belts could have different purposes as well, though I imagine it would be easier if Minecraft just added a belt and then the player determined the use of that belt simply by what they stored in it. So extra food, firework, rockets in a bed for exploring versus pickaxes, bundles, and torches for mining. I guess there could be maybe enchantments that could help, like maybe having a movement speed for exploring or extra protection for mining, or extra food saturation or something like that. We know that there's already been some additions recently with the armor trim, so adding a belt to the game could also like provide some just visual aesthetic changes if people want. You could have different belt colors to signify what belt might be happening. That also might help with PvP if a belt with a different functionality had like extra arrow slots or extra bow slots or crossbows. And so if you saw somebody with a blue belt across the PvP field, you're like, oh, that person has like an archery belt or something like that. Mm-hmm. I could see that sort of being an interesting way to play that. I'm not a fan of the Omni tool idea. I think that when I've played mods in the past that give you the ability to create a pickaxle or whatever they call it, which is like a pick, an axe, and a shovel all in one tool, it just gets kind of boring. Like it looks kind of funny, and it removes a lot of the strategy in the game, especially the early game. Auto switching between tools based on what you're pointing at, I also think I think that's just inherently part of the game, and it's not really for me. I mean, you could achieve the same thing by just giving the player the ability to punch anything and mine it. So then why do you need tools? Like, it's not called Punchcraft, it's called Minecraft, you know? and I think that there's a certain level of RP that I think has to be maintained for the game to be fun and immersive and make you think, you know, like make you think, well, I mean, pickaxe is taking forever to chop down this tree. Maybe I should make an axe, because that's how things work in real life too. You know, an axe is not going to be very good at digging up the ground. So I think that those things need to be maintained. I do find a lot of suggestions that we get for improving gameplay, quote unquote, go the route of automation, often without considering, if you're removing gameplay from Minecraft, is it also removing part of the appeal, the fun, or the reward? Like, if you make things too easy, it's not rewarding when you accomplish it. Like, if you had done your big dig project in creative, not nearly as rewarding as doing it in survival, let alone hardcore, right? Yeah. Like, there's a certain level of like chest thumping and like, look what I have done. Like Tom Hanks on the beach when he makes fire in Castaway, you know, like, just look what I have created, right?
Yeah.
And that's not the same as, like, people will still think it looks cool in creative mode, but if they know that you did in creative mode, there's not quite as much pure admiration that comes with it, right? And I think that when it comes to things like this, there's that balance of like, are you removing gameplay because you just want things to go faster, or are you removing gameplay because you feel like there's something wrong with how it's currently being done? And I think that impatience kind of creeps in there sometimes with some suggestions, and they just want things to go automatically. But I think that what happens in other games, in other mods for Minecraft sometimes, is that games do that. I've certainly played some survival games that make things a lot faster and skip certain steps, but then you're like, this wasn't as engaging. Like, all of a sudden, like, I'm in like the third tier of this game. I don't even remember spending any time in the first tier. So like, it just feels like an unnecessary administration step if there isn't that balance of time in versus reward along the tech tree. So yeah, I kind of feel the same way. Every time somebody suggests being able to mine a 2x2 or a 3x3 area with a tool, I'm like, my first thought is, so you're the kind of person who's just going to let all of these blocks despawn, because what happens if you can mine a 3x3 area is that your inventory fills up with blocks a lot faster, and then you run into the other problem that you worry about with like time management in game, and that's, where do I put all of these resources, and how do I set up a storage system that can contain everything? And, you know, some of the quality of life changes that people look for are actually going to affect the balance of the game in larger ways than you expect. I, like you, I think I much prefer the ability to store tools on a separate hotbar to having a single slot tool that does everything, although I'm fairly certain that Punchcraft is how I played Minecraft Dungeons. But I think the thing about this, also the idea of it like auto-switching between tools, is that naturally right now people don't worry as much about durability because everyone has mending on their tools. Like, if you're playing in survival, more often than not, you're going to have mending on your tools. And I feel like if it's switching tools for you, that would make it a little bit harder to be intentional with the tools you're using. It would make the durability a little harder to track. And I think that's not going to faze a lot of people. But then, how does it handle repairing those tools? And if you don't have mending on all of your tools and it's automatically switching, speaking as somebody who's not used mending for the entirety of Minecraft SOS, it would make it much harder for me to determine, am I about to break this shovel, or am I just going to be able to continue mining stone with the pickaxe that I'm currently using, right? So that there's a few considerations there. Besides that, if it automatically switched to the different tools, what if I want to use my Silk Touch pickaxe on grass because it's the only Silk Touch tool I have and I need a grass block? If it automatically switches to the shovel and I just get dirt, then that's not what I wanted. So any of the stuff that sort of the game is trying to interpret what you want, there are enough fringe cases in which you want to do the weird thing in Minecraft that I think stuff like that is not necessarily going to be helpful to everybody. Of course, if that's mixed in with the functionality of a tool belt, and the solution to that is, okay, I take the tool belt off and I go back to using my regular hotbar with my tools all laid out and I can kind of select, then I suppose that's fine. But having the option to quickly enable or disable that means adding another hotkey, it means adding another element to the touchscreen on mobile. There's so many additional considerations layered on top of that. Now, I do like, as we've said in previous discussions about these kind of topics, I like the idea of there being
a separate inventory row that gives you access to different stuff, a building hotbar versus a mining hotbar, or the email correspondent here, MC Engineer, says different play styles could be incorporated into them. So you could have one that's tailored specifically towards combat that could allow you to, like you said, have arrows and potions and like dedicated slots for those. The Explorers one is an interesting prospect, and I like the idea of finding those in trail ruins. For some reason, that's the environment that it makes sense that you'd find them in, for me. So you could have little bits and pieces like that. Maybe the Explorer's belt benefits from having a compass and a clock and things like that on that. The tools that we don't necessarily use all of the time, but are helpful in navigating the world. You know, you've always got a map on you, and you've got a dedicated slot for that, so it's not just constantly in your inventory taking up space that could be, you know, blocks and whatnot. It sort of ends up like the forestry mod backpacks, where you've got a backpack that only picks up saplings and plants and stuff for you. So maybe everything kind of automatically goes into that belt, but whether it becomes an out of sight, out of mind thing where the player forgets to look at that, it'd be something that you'd have to integrate into gameplay over time before people could really understand what it was meant to be used for and how to get the most out of it. Because I've seen people still unclear on what on earth bundles were supposed to be doing when I've used them very successfully on a few servers now, and I find them a really handy tool even if they're not available in pure vanilla.
I think something else that you brought up in terms of using these for exploration or adding these in is that there wasn't anything in the email about what might be sacrificed. Like, can you wear this at the same time that you have a chest plate on?
Yeah.
Can you wear it at the same time that you have an elytra on? Would that apply to all the belts, or would it just be like, okay, well, you've got a building belt. I'm going to guess you probably don't need your elytra right now. So that the building belt is like non-compatible with that. Maybe an exploring belt, they don't want it to replace the chest plate because that might be dangerous if you're going out into the dark places in the world. So there's different caveats like that where, like, if you're going to give the players this kind of advantage, then you might want to have some sort of trade-off for them in the long run. I do really like the idea of having the offhand slot type thing in the toolbar. So, like, right now, I can look at the toolbar and say my pickaxe, my shovel, and my axe are all there. Let's say 1, 2, 3, and I can see what level they're at as far as durability, like your point about mending. But if I was switching through a few different tools in my tool belt and I couldn't see anything but the one that I was using, as long as I could see the one that I was using in like a little like offhand type slot next to the toolbar, I could still see the durability. Mm-hmm. So as long as I just looked at it before I used it, that could be an interesting solution. Like to say like, okay, well, you've got your tool hand and you have your offhand, you know, and maybe those both get moved to the player hotbar. You know, you put your tool hand on the one side and you put your offhand on the other. I feel like for me being right-handed, and maybe just because we're North America and this part of the world where we and yours where we read left to right as opposed to different places, right? Where mm-hmm. you know, you want those things on the left. Like, I don't know many people that have their pickaxe on like number 9. You know, like it's usually down the left, right? Mm-hmm. But then the offhand, so it would make sense for the tool hand to be on the left, like at the start of the toolbar. But then if your offhand is also your left hand, it depends on how you play. And I guess if they did that, they could make it customizable, like just decide which one you want to be left and right as the main and offhand, right?
Yeah.
Because I'm right-handed, so I play with my pickaxe in my right hand. It makes sense. It lines up with that experience of like I use my mouse right-handed, so the arm on the screen is on the right, like all that kind of stuff. So it gets a little complicated, but I do like that idea of having that secondary window next to the hotbar to see like what item you're actually using.
Yeah. On the subject of that, by the way, on a bit of a tangent from this email, Minecraft collaborated with High Ground, who are a keyboard manufacturer, to just come out with a bunch of different designs for custom Minecraft-themed keyboards, one of which is like effectively a kind of overlay of the player's inventory on the keyboard with like the legends, the kind of letters and numbers and stuff written next to it, but then there's an item, almost as though the letter is where the stack size or like stack amount kind of indicator would be in Minecraft. And I like the look of a lot of these keyboards. They actually were kind enough to send me a preview of one of them, so I have the blocky one that's like all the block textures, and I didn't want the one that has the inventory overlay on it because the hotbar management on that is absolutely psychotic. There's like, they've got a map on 1, a pickaxe and a sword on 2 and 3, which is where I have my pickaxe and my sword, which is great. But then torches are on 4, food is on 5, the next 3 are blocks, and then there's something else at the end. I think it's like a bucket of water or something. And like, there was so many decisions made there that I'm like, I don't know if they consulted any players about how this hotbar management was supposed to look, or like, but I don't think I could work with the cognitive dissonance of having the number 1 key be a map on the keyboard but not be a map in game. And so I then have to lay out my hotbar that way, which doesn't include an axe or a shovel or like any of the tools that I normally have on my hotbar. And I'm like, I need to mod the keyboard at that point to have custom keys that have all of the items from my hotbar on there, and then I feel like I'd be a little happier with it. But yeah, it's funny to see. Like, it's not even necessarily somebody else's idea of how inventory management would work. I think they've just taken a bunch of attractive-looking sprites and applied them to those with maybe some guidance from the Mojang team. But I think it's really odd to see what people put there if they're not necessarily thinking about how they would be playing in-game.
Yeah, it's like when you try a new game and there's a map and the hotkey is not M.
Yeah.
It's like what? Like what? Why would you do that? Like every game for as long as I can remember, the hotkey for a map is M.
Decisions were made.
Yeah. Like you're just testing us now.
Yeah, definitely. It's like me going between Minecraft and any other survival game. Like when I was playing Enshrouded, I had to rebind sprint to control and crouch to shift, where they're normally reversed 100%. For a lot of other games like that. So yeah, it's kind of a funny one. Anyway, I'm going to read this email, but this kind of springboards us into your discussion topic for this week for our kind of May round table, where we're both going to bring a different discussion topic. So this email comes in from Andruvius with the subject of AI playing Minecraft. Hey Pix and Joel, with the revolutionary AI models that are updating every day, I've started to wonder if and when someone would code something that could actually play Minecraft. The newest OpenAI model 4.0 has some really interesting features, mainly live vision. From current, it seems that if you input your screen, theoretically the AI could send commands through a mod to move and interact in Minecraft. I figure that you may need to slow down the game with the new /tick command if it needs more time to respond. Would integrating AI into Minecraft be a cool tool to use? Do you think it could be abused, especially in multiplayer? Would love to hear your thoughts. Andruvius was killed by AI_player.
So I thought this was really, really interesting because I have been seeing a lot of AI-related social media posts and clips from Google and ChatGPT presentations over the last month. And to kind of set the stage with it before getting into Andruvius's email, AI potentially in Minecraft, there's really steps going down this road, potentially. Google's new AI will play video games with you, but not win, as an article on TheVerge.com we'll have linked in our show notes this week. Earlier in May, Google DeepMind revealed SEMA, Scalable Instructable Multi-World Agent, which is designed to learn how to play open world games using natural language instruction, understanding 3D worlds, and image recognition. It's currently in the research phase. Google worked with 8 game developers, including Hello Games, Embracer, Tuxedo Labs, Coffee Stain, and others, to train and test SEMA. For those wondering, Hello Games is behind No Man's Sky. Coffee Stain is behind Goat Simulator, I believe also Valheim and Satisfactory. I think they're the publisher on Valheim. I don't know about the developer. They're certainly one of the developers on Satisfactory. SEMA doesn't require custom API or source code. It isn't trained to win a game. It's trained to run it and do what it's told, says Google DeepMind researcher and SEMA co-lead Tim Harley. So the idea behind this, after reading the whole article, is it's not an AI meant to beat your butt at chess, at Go, or at League of Legends. Like, that's not what it is. It's meant to be something that will learn to play the game along with you. So it's also different from the, I guess, mislabeled AI we call things in games like NPC AI or mob AI when you're fighting. They're just programmed on a series of parameters, and very seldom do you see, I guess it's getting better, but you don't see a lot of adaptation from certain bad guys. It's usually pattern recognition as a player. Yeah. You might be able to speak to this from something like an Elden Ring boss. Like if they basically probably have the same kind of attack pattern. They don't necessarily adapt to you, the player. If you decide to change your strategy, the boss strategy doesn't necessarily then adapt to counter you, right? It's more of a you having to adapt to the boss's strategy so that you can win. And I think that was an interesting way to approach this. And the fact that it doesn't require API or source code is really interesting as well, because it means that just like a player, this has to learn and then learn to play the game that would complement the other human players. So it's meant to be more of like a companion thing. The example that Andruvius uses is ChatGPT 4o, which the O stands for Omni. And in addition to the chat and language models, there's also a vision demo. We'll have a link to the vision demo on YouTube in our show notes. It's only a 4-minute video, but it's definitely worth watching. They do a live math equation, and they specifically tell ChatGPT to not give them the answer to the equation, but walk them through the steps. Give me hints on how I can complete this correctly. And that's where my brain kind of tweaked and said, okay, well, the main idea, with these AIs from Google SEMA is to be a companion. So it's not necessarily going to play the game for you, but you can imagine it being something that could help in a multiplayer situation that would be, say, akin to a parent and child playing the game, where the parent wants the child to be all creative and do the things, and maybe the child says, well, can you look out for creepers while I do this, right? Well, maybe the AI could do that. Like maybe your AI multiplayer companion could be just like, okay, Joel, you go ahead and build the house. I'll keep watch and I'll let you know if there's a zombie or a skeleton or a creeper that gets too close. And whether or not they do something about it is entirely different. It depends, I guess, on the skill of the AI that you're using. But if that was something that could be possible, that could be really interesting, especially if you apply it to something like onboarding and tutorial. And when I was listening to this ChatGPT have a conversation with the people in the demo about this math equation, it would be really cool if you were like looking for a desert biome. It's your first time in Minecraft and you're like, I don't know, like I really need sand, but like I can't seem to find enough of it to do what I want. And then the AI multiplayer companion says like, well, there's a chance that like desert being a warm biome, that it might be next to other warm biomes. So I think we passed a warm ocean back there. Maybe if we went in that direction, we could find it, rather than just telling you, according to the seed, that there's a desert at these coordinates. You're like, it's not a make win button. The idea would be just to encourage players to kind of explore the game a little bit. So I did a test. I'm curious about what you might think about this. Hopefully this is going to work live on the show. Can you give some tips for someone playing Minecraft for the first time?
Of course, starting Minecraft can be a lot of fun. Here are some beginner tips. First, gather basic resources like wood. Punch trees to get wood blocks, which you can then craft into planks and sticks. These are essential for making tools and building your first shelter. Second, make a crafting table early on. This will allow you to craft a wider variety of items. Use 4 wooden planks to make it. Third, build a simple shelter before nightfall. Use dirt or wood to create a small hut. This will protect you from monsters that appear at night. Fourth, craft basic tools like a wooden pickaxe, axe, and shovel. These will help you gather resources more efficiently. Use sticks and wooden planks to craft them. Fifth, mine stone to upgrade your tools. Stone tools last longer and work faster. Look for exposed stone or dig down a few blocks. Lastly, explore and experiment. Minecraft is about creativity and discovery, so don't hesitate to try new things. Craft, build, and explore to learn the game's mechanics. What part of Minecraft are you most excited about? Building, exploring, or maybe something else?
I mean, that's not bad for just an initial idea about how to get started in it. And it was something that I thought, like, with the right kind of tweaks or the right kind of, we'll say, restrictions of not like spelling out everything, like that's a little bit hand-holdy. Like you wouldn't necessarily, if you really wanted to explore Minecraft for the first time, that might be a little bit too much instruction, but I thought it was really interesting that it just encouraged like the creativity, the exploration, and gave you enough to get going, but didn't go beyond didn't start talking about diamond tools, didn't really spend too much time talking about mobs, just if at all. And I could see AI is being used more in that way. From the concern about being abused in PvP, I mean, I think they're a long way off from that. From what I can tell, SEMA is just in the research mode. I don't think we have anything to worry about in PvP yet. My concern, though, would be in multiplayer situations, specifically with younger players, being convinced that they're playing with another person.
Yeah.
If a server did not have the right kind of restrictions on AI models and things, or if the right, I guess not NDA, but if the right disclosure wasn't there, then I'd be concerned with scammers and other bots and things that are portraying themselves as real people. It's getting harder and harder. One of the videos that I looked up before the show to get some quick insight into some of the things that were announced with ChatGPT and SEMA this past month. One of them was a video, and it was pretty decent sounding audio, lots of visual clips, clips from different presentations. The man's voice that was reading sounded pretty articulate and good. It was a good pace. And it wasn't until I noticed like a repetitive voice inflection and an inconsistency with pronouncing SEMA or SIMA. And I was just like, didn't they just call it SEMA like 2 minutes ago? And I was like, it was an AI voice prompt. Like, it wasn't a real person. It was somebody wrote a script, and then it was an AI voice reading the video. And we're getting to that point where, like, I've got to work to make sure that I'm listening to a real person or not. And I think that if you get that in a video game where there are no visuals, like Minecraft is so simple, like you're not necessarily looking at another person on camera, and the communication in game could be so simple, or could be text based. And I think that would be my concern in terms of AI. We'll say abusing AI in Minecraft would be those kinds of concerns. I don't think we're going to get into a situation anytime soon where AI is going to be playing the game unfairly, especially because that doesn't seem to be a flex for these AI developers. Like, computers beating me at chess has been able to happen for a long time. That's not necessarily a high bar. It's more the learning to play the game that helps people or makes the game more enjoyable. I really like the idea of some future where we're playing a video game. Maybe you're on Xbox, or maybe you're on a computer. You've got a headset or a microphone like we do as streamers, and you can just ask the game, hey, I'm a little turned around. Like, which way do I go? And maybe you have like an in-game companion, like an R2D2, that actually just like says to you, well, let me just pull up a map and see, like, well, the last time we saw one of these, it was back that way, or head back west by 200 meters, and then we'll see if we can retrace our steps. Like, that kind of interaction in a video game would be really, really cool if the AI companion that you have is like something that you can interact with in real time. And something I noticed from asking the ChatGPT, this is ChatGPT 4. I don't think 4.0 is out for everybody yet, but the quickness at which it gave me a response, and as I asked other questions, it continued on with new information, didn't necessarily repeat what it had just said. And I thought it was really interesting to see. And I'd be curious to see like what kind of things could happen. I thought it was also worth noting that probably because Minecraft is owned by Microsoft, but it wasn't on the list of open world games being tested by AI, right? And you're just like, that's interesting, because that would have been one of the big ones I would imagine would be up for testing. But where it's Google doing SEMA, I can see why that didn't happen. But anyway, it was worth pondering. I thought it was a really cool email from Andrubius, so thanks for sending that in. As a tool to use, I think there's some potential. I don't see any real abuse of it in terms of player advantage. It's more about the deception of whether, like, what you're dealing with in the game, and whether or not that's real. Because that, I think, is a concern on social media right now. And so I think that will just eventually quicker than what we would want, spill over into video games.
Yeah, I think the thing about this is, first of all, it's going to be something that a player is going to make themselves as a passion project. Like, it's not a feature that's going to make its way into the game as a tutorial element, because I think part of the Minecraft experience right now revolves around the concept of being alone if you're in a single player world, or playing with real people as friends if you're in a multiplayer world. And I can recognize the value in trying to simulate a real person playing along with you, but then of course there are ethical concerns about that, which you've already kind of noted, right? I don't think anybody's going to use AI tools to win in a PvP situation when there are already hacks and whatnot that allow you to automatically swipe a sword at anybody who comes within a certain radius of you. Like, I've seen tools like that being used before. And amusingly enough, Mogswamp even logged into the Minecraft SOS server with a hacked client so that he could demonstrate like extraordinary superhuman powers on a talent show that he put together for himself. Like, he could jump higher than a normal player and like run faster on soul sand than any of us could, and walk on water and that kind of stuff, because he literally just wanted something funny to do that like we wouldn't be able to explain through normal Minecraft mechanics. And so he was like, yeah, I kind of didn't ask permission because it was going to spoil the surprise, but I logged in with a hacked client and just kind of modified the game so I could jump 7 blocks in the air or whatever. And yeah, so there's little bits and pieces of this that I recognize where people are coming from when they're talking about it having potential. The clip that you just played us from ChatGPT, as far as I can tell, it's getting that information from somewhere, right? Like, there are a lot of existing how to play Minecraft articles and stuff that are out there that it's collating that information and distilling it and then maybe putting it in its own words at a push. But that's effectively like, you know, it's done a Google search for you and has come up with a series of like, you know, how to play Minecraft tips from that. And I am most curious about whether or not, without access to any of that information, if it would come up with the same information on its own, if it was able to extrapolate information just from what it was seeing and not relying on the vast reserves of information available on the internet, and could interpret stuff in a way that would make sense and it would be able to convey a tutorial to the player after having seen gameplay for a fixed amount of time. And whether that's something that can be, you know, effectively an offline companion to Minecraft in that sense. And that's something that I think would take a lot more of the development and research that's going into AI right now. The other thing is, what are we trying to augment or replace by involving AI in Minecraft gameplay, right? Is it going to be a replacement for there being other human beings in the game with you? Is it going to be a replacement for looking up stuff on the Minecraft wiki? I feel like my problem with it is that at every turn it seems to be diverting people away from interacting with other humans as part of the Minecraft community, which, ironically enough, even if it's simulating a multiplayer experience and another presence in-game, ends up functionally isolating you more from the other people playing the game. And so, quite aside from like the ethical concerns people have over AI's power consumption and, you know, the other kind of controversies that are coming up around AI, that's the bit that I still have yet to be convinced by, is the notion that it's a more effective replacement than, and a more soulful replacement than being able to play with other people. Like, I got into playing Minecraft on YouTube because I wanted to be able to connect with other people and play together on a server, and like the notion that one of those people might be some sort of AI presence, or that it wasn't immediately apparent that it was an AI presence, is the thing that always concerns me about this stuff. It's very interesting to watch it develop as a technology, but I still have my doubts about when and where it should be used, instead of it just being something that you talk to other real people about, you know?
Well, the comparisons that I've seen in the last month have been to the movie Her, which, if for people that haven't seen the whole movie, the point was that AI technology develops to the point where it actually isolates people more than it does connect them.
It's a cautionary tale.
Yeah, exactly, right? And so people are on one hand saying like, oh, it's just like Her, and other people is like, you missed the point of the entire movie. Like, this is not a good thing for humanity. But To your point about the offline idea, I know that something we've brought up a number of times about this in Minecraft is the idea of having to exit the game to get certain bits of information. Now, at a certain level, I think it's good that you then have to talk to other players about like how to build a crazy farm or how to learn new building techniques, because you're tapping into other humans' creativity at that point.
Yeah.
That, but I feel like it could be really interesting to outside of the achievements in the game, if you had something in the game that only had game knowledge, didn't have, access to the internet to, like, as you pointed out, scrape that information and give it to you. But if you were imagine if your LA could talk to you, imagine if you're in the game and you start off with an LA, similar to how you get like a little sidekick in a lot of RPGs, out there. And you're like, I'm stuck. I don't know what to do next. It's like, well, you've been using wood tools. Like, I saw some stone back there. Maybe we should try that. Just little things like that would be a really interesting way to keep that experience in the game, and have it be. And that's where I think like the balance is like an onboarding tutorial AI rather than a multiplayer companion AI. Like, it's not meant to replace another person, and imagine if it was a real multiplayer situation where it's both of you and your AI, kind of tutorial, hoverbot telling you what to do, or even just answering your questions. Like, as you're discussing, it would be very cool to have that conversation with another player and then have the AI chime in and say, actually, I saw some coal back there. Did you guys miss it? And you'd be just like, yeah, where was it? Show us. Like, that kind of thing would be really, really interesting. And as long, again, it's a line that they have to skirt, but and I know we're nowhere near it, but it does make you think about what the future of gaming, specifically sandbox and social type games like this, will be when AI gets to the point where it can interact on that level. But we'll see.
Yeah, like it's curious, the barrier really between that and something we have right now, let's say Tango Tech's Techtopia mod, where villagers can be more automated and can be told what to do given certain parameters. They have like lumberjack villagers that will go out and harvest wood for you and clear an area and that kind of stuff. Really the only barrier between that and what you're describing is a decent like voice recognition software alternative, right? And so I imagine that there are things that can be done without necessarily leveraging what we think of as AI technology, but could still be done through some sort of interpretive language modeling like mod, let's say, and have that speak to the voice chat mod and have that relay into whatever mod is out there, like Techtopia or whatever, without it having the veneer of AI placed upon it. Like, I think if you split it up into the parts that would be, informative and necessary for Minecraft gameplay, it could look very different to this sort of broader scope of what people are using AI for right now. So, yeah, like, it's interesting, and it would be really cool to hear more emails about this kind of topic, although I know AI can be a controversial one, so we'll probably leave it there for now. What I wanted to bring to the show this week was a revision of an opinion I've shared on the show previously and shared on my YouTube channel, specifically around my Hardcore Survival Guide series, when I went on record saying that there are no good deaths in Minecraft, primarily because the cause of every death in Minecraft can be avoided. Most deaths in Minecraft are because you messed up in some way, or, occasionally they can be intentional, but a lot of the time, accidental deaths, often those that lead to, like, the loss of a hardcore world, for example, are things that could very easily have been avoided. And I would like to add some nuance to this argument, because based on the events of Minecraft SOS last week, I think there are situations where they can be good deaths, quote unquote, and they are the ones that either provide entertainment or an opportunity to learn. So, for a bit of context, we had a pillagers versus villagers event in which we drew out roles in a kind of hidden role scenario similar to Among Us or Werewolf, the board game, in which we had a bunch of us who were villagers, myself included, and 3 people who were pillagers. We were all given a set of tasks to perform, and we were supposed to deduce through what people had been doing on the server the last couple of weeks which of us were the pillagers and which were the villagers. there was a bit of overlap between the tasks, but the pillagers were causing mischief here and there, whereas the villagers were mostly kind of doing good deeds for each other and helping gather resources and showing up, like cosplaying as the wandering trader with a couple of llamas brought with you and that kind of thing, right? And I ended up not doing as much of it because I was simply too occupied with the building project, and so I kind of abstained from the task and didn't get the reward, the fake coins at the end. But we were all supposed to be involved with voting for who we thought the pillagers were. And as a group, we successfully identified the 3 players who drew the role of pillager, at which point they triggered a TNT minecart trap and blew up 10 of us. And so There were only 3 people left who survived, myself, Mogswamp, and Fwip. And it was audacious, it was calculated, but I think most of all, it was the most entertaining outcome for the situation, because immediately we were sent into panic mode on a scale that we have not seen so far on this server. And this is a server where we've had people die during mob headhunting events. We had 3 people killed by the Wither when I was finishing digging out the hole with everybody there. And this was mass destruction on a scale we had not yet seen. We were able to scrape together 60 fate coins just based on like what people would have earned through winning that event, what everybody else had stashed in their piggy banks, and a few people, including myself, got last-minute advancements so that they could earn a coin here and there to revive everybody except for the pillagers who were left as gravestones and have now exit the series for good. And it's probably easy to say this as somebody who survived the explosion, but it really elevated the whole event to have suddenly the stakes increased to that level, and everybody who ended up getting exploded as part of this TNT trap was genuinely thinking, well, I'm out of the series now. But in retrospect, it made for one of the most entertaining moments of the series so far, and it made me think about the value that has as part of the experience of Minecraft, and that the experience of Minecraft is presumed to be this long-term, ongoing, survive as long as you can kind of approach, right? You see people like Filzer as the primary example for this, who famously died, lost a hardcore world that had been going for about 5 years to a baby zombie in a cave somewhere, and it's the most, random feeling, happenstance, seemingly insignificant death. And interestingly enough, Filzer is now, I think, about to pass or already has passed the record for that world's length again. Like he's getting back into having had a world for 5 years and is still going with the new one. And that's one of those deaths that kind of becomes legendary within the community. The clip goes viral, elevates his audience and gets him to kind of like celebrity status within the Minecraft community. And in retrospect, that's a very good thing. And so even though it feels at the time as though it's one of the worst things that can happen, and it doesn't feel like a great way to go out, in retrospect, with the context of everything that's happened since, I feel like it can be considered a good death. And so that's where I come from the entertainment value on this side of things. And the other side is perhaps one that might relate to the experience you and I have a lot more, because we're regular survival players. We're not necessarily hardcore players. So, like, if we die, it's not like, we're concerned about the circumstances of it as much. Like, we're not looking for, like, a flashy way to go out or something like that. If anything, it's an inconvenience and we pick our stuff back up and we just go about our day. But I think where I need to look at it from a different angle is from the learning opportunity angle. Because you and I have been playing Minecraft for a long time at this point. Like, I'm coming up on 10 years of having played the game on PC, and I've already passed 10 years of having originally played on Xbox. So I'm looking at it from the top down. I'm looking at it from, like, I know everything in this game that can kill me and how it will kill me. And those are the circumstances I'm trying to avoid at every opportunity. And so I am having a harder time looking at it from the perspective of a newer player who, if you don't have a ton of experience in Minecraft yet, every death is an opportunity to learn. It's sort of like, not to compare it to Dark Souls because everyone compares everything to Dark Souls these days, but that's a game that really teaches you through the mechanic of you getting killed over and over again, and you sort of learn what the patterns are and you learn how to dodge things. And in Minecraft, you're learning how to handle, the creeper as it blows you up. You go, oh, okay, maybe I should back off from that thing before it fully has a chance to explode. You learn that you can't take a fall of more than about 20 blocks without enchantments, or you die of fall damage. You learn through raiding an ocean monument that Guardian's laser attacks ignore armor, and you learn that avoiding the warden is better than fighting it. And so there are so many little learning opportunities and stuff like that where deaths can be frustrating, but looking past that frustration to the information you now possess is probably the most important part of the process. And that was really all I wanted to go into, was just like the notion that while every death can be avoided, some of them, if they're not necessary, they are at least useful deaths. Does that make sense?
Oh, absolutely. And I even relearn some things, as I die from time to time on the server. I mean, sometimes it's just as simple as, taking your forehead off on a block when you're taking off when you're elytra, and you hit it a little bit too hard, and next thing you know, there's a yard sale. But other times it's I am focusing so much on building. I even find stopping and eating to be an inconvenience in what I really want to do right now, which is finish the creative thing that I'm trying to do.
Yeah.
And then you come back from a break, or you come back from sleeping overnight to get the sunlight back up, and there's a creeper in front of you. It's like, well, it's fine. I've been playing the game for 7 years. I know how to handle a creeper, forgetting the fact that you're under 3 hunger, haunches, and that you have taken a little bit of damage from jumping off of roofs the last little while, because that's what you've been building. So you're only at half health. And it's like, that is a very slim mistake away from being owned by a creeper at endgame, despite having some decent armor. I mean, like, granted, I have a elytra on and not a chest plate, but like, I'm not geared to the max, but I should still be able to handle a creeper. But every once in a while, like, the timing's off, or like you go to sprint jump, can't sprint jump if you're hungry, and but you forget that mechanic isn't there. And it just takes one death to be like, right, never mind. It happened to me the other day where I went to approach a creeper, and I was like, oh, well, the last time on stream I did this, I got blown up, and it was kind of embarrassing. So I'm going to eat and look at this creeper until I have enough food and enough health where I can go over there. And even if it does blow up, it's not going to be the end of the world. But I just remember making that mental note. It was like, I feel like I'm making an early game decision, despite the fact that I've been playing this game for so long. I find that for me, survival with deaths, it's more about losing stuff. I don't care about death counter. I don't really care necessarily how I die. It's more about, like, did I die over lava or over the void? How much of my next game session is going to be getting all the stuff back? Whether it was stacks of stuff in my inventory that was important, whether it was a netherite pickaxe that was fully enchanted that's going to take a very long time to replace, and is not overly interesting gameplay. I think that's the other thing. If it was fun to replace it, then it wouldn't be that big of a deal. Like, all right, well, it looks like we're going on an adventure next time. It's like, nope, this is a bunch of, like, getting levels at a farm and then enchanting stuff and buying books from villagers. And, like, it doesn't take a long time, and it can be a fun way to, as a streamer, chat with your chat room, because you're not really doing anything that's dangerous or engaging in game. You can kind of have more of a hangout session than a building session. But I do find that kind of stuff just puts me farther away from the creative thing that I set out to do in the first place.
Yeah.
And it's the inconvenience of having to, I guess, get yourself set back up again so that the thing that you want to do doesn't take even longer. Because I could build an iron pickaxe and an iron axe and just keep on building my house. But if I make a mistake and I have to take down a bunch of stuff, it's going to take forever because I don't have a fast enchanted tool. Like, I don't have that kind of stuff. So it's definitely one of those things that I avoid because of the creative setback. So it's interesting how your values change too. Like, as you first start playing, you don't want to die. Yeah. And because you might die in a position where you're far enough away from where you would set up, where you're like, whatever, it's just easier for me to start new here right now and lose the last 30 minutes. Whereas at endgame, like, you can get, if you've died just in a field somewhere and everything is fine, you can get your stuff back in a matter of 5 minutes. Like, it's really not that hard. Yeah. But it's the longer reset. It's the longer delay. I think it's the level of control at this stage of the game, playing the game for so long and on a server that hasn't reset. The amount of control I have over what I do in the game is very, very high. And death while losing your items is one of the things where once it happens, you really feel like you no longer have a choice in what you do next. You're going to have to re-gear. That's just something you have to do, and you're like, all right, well, I think the thing that bugs me most about that is the lack of choice. Like, it's that you are now you've gone from the entrepreneur sandbox to the you have a job and you've been told what to do.
Yeah.
You know, and it's not the most fun, you know, and
Yeah.
it's a small price. Like it's not the same as like a hardcore world at all, but it's just the level of, I guess, importance that you assign death depends on how you value the consequences. And for me, delaying the completion of whatever I'm doing creatively and getting those creative juices flowing is just as annoying as other deaths might be for other people, you know, like being set back and having to go back to your spawn and walk all the way to your stuff, like whatever that is for somebody. For me, it's the delay of being able to be creative.
Yeah. And I think that's, I guess the difference is that like you're getting your kicks from this game out of building stuff and exercising the creative stuff and the artistic side of things, where somebody else might be more of a thrill seeker and is going to be out there fighting off all of the mobs. And, you know, if they die during that, they can kind of whoop and holler and be like, you know, that was a heck of a way to go out. And then they can return there and get their stuff, or that's the end of their hardcore world. And I think that's an approach that Minecraft SOS has really taught me. Is like, I was expecting this series to, you know, teach me more about the value of death, because we were literally equating it to a value of like the currency that we had on the server, and like how fragile some of us felt in certain situations. The fact that my first death was me falling in lava just because I wasn't looking at the game window at the time, and before I knew anything it was too late. I just had a video on my second monitor that I was paying more attention to. But instead what it's taught me is that what I'm creating isn't always going to last forever, especially in the case of this server being a limited time thing. And so the more valuable thing is entertainment for the audience, social interaction with the other people who are there, and, you know, getting the most out of the experience almost holistically. And that includes stuff like being part of these events where people can get blown up at a minute's notice, and like people can just do the craziest thing in order for it to generate a moment that everyone is going to have a different take on in their videos, and that they can enjoy and spin out into a bit of a narrative. And so whether people wanted to paint Fwip as the villain for spawning a wither during the mining event, or, you know, if they wanted to look at the pillagers in our pillagers versus villagers thing as like a team who were doomed from the start because it was going to be obvious who they were, like you can generate like a story around it. And I think that's ultimately what Minecraft is about in a lot of ways for people who play with a broader look at things. It's about finding a way to tell a story, whether that's through building a long-term project that's going to feel like a significant part of the world, or whether it's about finding the story within like the little interactions you're having with other players. And so deaths can be a part of that story, and that's sort of the philosophical conclusion I've come to on this topic. That is where we're going to end this episode of The Spawn Chunks, though. You can find more information about the show and links to some of the stuff that we've talked about today at thespawnchunks.com. The music for the show is composed by me, and The Spawn Chunks is proud as ever to be a listener-supported podcast. If you're getting some value out of the show, why not consider putting some value back in? You can visit patreon.com/thespawnchunks to join our community, where pledging at any level will get an invite to our patrons-only Discord chat. You can listen to the show live when we record it in Discord every week. You can also watch the show live, since Joel and I have our video feeds live in there as we're recording them. We have our monthly Minecraft audio hangout coming up on June 1st. That's where our patrons can share what they've been up to in Minecraft that month, share screenshots, and we have a good discussion about those. We currently have 324 patrons, which is steady on from last week. There is always room for more. Special thanks go out to our content engineer patrons, Hunter555, Jumbo Sale, Mindtrip Media, Party Voyager, and Yitz. Thank you for your support on this episode.
Sharing the podcast with your friends is the easiest way to support the show. You can find us at The Spawn Chunks on social media. New episodes are available on Mondays on all of the major podcasting platforms, including YouTube, and you can look forward to video on YouTube starting next week. You can email the show at spawnchunkmail@gmail.com. The RSS feed is linked at thespawnchunks.com, and the patron-only RSS feed is on the Patreon page. That's where you can listen to the render distance, the extended version of the podcast.
My name is Jonny, but online I go by Pixel Riffs. You can find most of what I do at youtube.com/pixelriffs, where Minecraft SOS should be wrapping up in the next week or so, and the Minecraft Survival Guide will be making a return to its third season. I stream 3 days a week on Twitch, where I do behind-the-scenes work for my YouTube series, and I'm the voice of the unofficial Hermitcraft recap, which you can find through a quick YouTube search. Aside from that, I'm at Pixel Riffs on both Twitter and Instagram. Joel, where can people find you online?
Everything that I'm doing online can be found at joelduggan.com. That includes a link to the Citadel Cafe, my other podcast about sci-fi and fantasy entertainment. I'm Joel Duggan on social media and Joel Duggan on Twitch, where I stream Thursday through Sunday, and Fridays are Lego. The rest of the time, I'm working to finish the Citadel build of Westhill.
Thanks for visiting the Spawn Chunks. The world outside is infinite, and we're just passing through.